So you've painstakingly created your level sequence with camera shakes, camera animations, Niagara effects, and spawnable actors. But you now decide that you want to move it from here to a different location with a different rotation. And the last thing you want to do is to have to go through your entire level sequence, moving all of these keys. So how do you change the transform, the location and origin of the entire sequence without having to change all the keys individually? Today we're going to have a look at that. So the way that you do it is if you go to your level sequence in the editor and go to the details, you might think you can change the transform here and that would change the sequence, but that won't work because it only changes the level sequence actor visually in the editor. What you need to do is go down to the instance data and tick the override instance data box. That now gives you access to the transform origin actor and the transform origin. And the way that level sequences work is that all of the actors in your level sequence are relative to an origin. And by default, that origin is at 0, 0, 0 with 0 degrees of rotation. So when you're authoring your sequences, it's always best to use this transform as the origin. For instance, if I wanted to simply move the level sequence that is playing in front of the character to maybe 300 units across, I could change the transform origin here. So I could change that to 300. And if I then save the sequence and go back and play it here, it will now move 300 units to the right, but it will transform all of the origin points and the Niagara effects and the spawned actor will all move perfectly. If I wanted to play it in front of this arrow instead of front of this character, I could also do that. So if I go back to the tutorial here, go back to the instance data, we set the origin back to its default, we can pick an origin actor. So you could click on this icon here and just pick one from the scene. So pick arrow. And if we save that and then activate it here, and now when we play, again, it will now play in front of the arrow. And everything should be transferred in terms of the keys, the shakes, the camera movements, the Niagara effects, and the spawned actor. So that all works as we would expect. Similarly, if I was to take this and maybe rotate it, so this is the arrow. If I was to rotate it, say 60 degrees, save that, and now play it. It will now rotate the entire sequence, but again, everything will be transferred perfectly, as we can see. So that's the way that you would do it in the actual level editor itself. But what if you wanted to be able to change it during gameplay? In other words, I want to be able to press, say, the 1 key, and every time I press that, this sequence plays in front of the player character. So we would probably use a similar approach, but we need to do this in code. So if we just turn this off here in the editor, we just save that and close it. And if we go to our third-person character blueprint, and say I wanted to do it on the debug key. So the first thing I'll need to do is to create a level sequence player and choose our tutorial sequence that we're playing. We can connect that up. So the first thing we need to do is to set the override instance data. So we can say set override instance data from the actor. And we need to check that as being true. We then need to get the instance data. So get instance default instance data. And the thing that will trip you up here is that you can't change anything directly on here. You need to cast it to a default level sequence instance data, which isn't particularly intuitive. Once you've done that, you now have access to the instance data. And from here, you can say set transform origin or set transform origin actor. So if we do the transform origin actor first, just so we can see if there's any issues, we know that our origin actor, we want it to be our self, the third person character. And then once we have set it, we can then say, tell the sequence player to play. So that will then play the sequence. We'll notice an issue when we do this, and that is because of the origin of the actual player itself. So you can see that the Z location is 92. But let's just test what happens. So if I press 1 here, it transfers all the keys, but you can see that it's at a Z location above the ground. And that's because the pivot of the character is above the ground. Otherwise, everything else is working. So what we would probably want to do is, instead of setting the transform actor, we can do set transform origin. We can split the origin. We can split the location as well, because we want the Z to be 0. That's how we've authored our sequence. And now we can say get actor location. We can split it, keep the X and the Y, leave the Z at 0. We want to capture the rotation as well. So we want get actor rotation. Or we can put that straight into here. And then we can connect it this way. So now it should hopefully play on the ground. So if we play it again, when I press 1 here, it plays it on the ground correctly. It transfers all the keys. And it plays the Niagara effect and spawns the actual sword. So we could go and we could collect that sword. And now if we come over here and we press 1 again, it will now play it in this location with this actor's rotation as its transform. And again, all of the keys should be perfectly transferred, including the Niagara effects, the shakes, and the spawned actor. So that's how you can change the transform of the entire sequence, either in the level editor itself or in the blueprint. And the key is that you need to override this instance data, which then gives you access either to the origin actor, which will define its origin, or to an actual origin transform, where you can move it around with a different rotation. So I hope that helps explain it.